Let them out. The Supreme Court may rule that California has to do just that. Let out thousands of the incarcerated in our overcrowded prison system. Not because we don't have room, but because we don't have the money. But because we're not treating them right. What? Protect your pet. Well, you don't have any choice in San Bernardino County. And soon the city of Cypress might decide for you as well. Might decide what you ask. Let's just say your dogs will never be the same. And word to the wise, keep your hands on the wheel. I don't care if you're good enough to win the race. If you can't finish on four wheels, you don't deserve to win. All the stories people are talking about and everything you need to know right now on The Filter. Good Monday to you. Off the top, it's The Filter Forefront. Our top four of the day, including, if you're in San Francisco, you better watch where you sit. But we'll begin with this. Businesses are struggling. Families are struggling. People are struggling. The president says federal workers must share some of the pain. He is proposing a 2-year pay freeze for federal workers, excluding the military. They estimate it would save at least $5 billion through 2012. So we know the state of California and the city of Los Angeles are both in horrible financial shape. Would it be a good idea to try that plan here? The state of California faces a deficit of $25 billion over the next 20 months. There are almost 240,000 state workers in California. Gross wages paid monthly, $1.5 billion. Would you freeze state worker salaries? The city of Los Angeles faces a $485 million budget deficit and has around 40,000 employees that are paid $243 million each month. Freeze those salaries, and it adds up. Our contributors tonight, the editor of Turner's 2 Cents, Cameron Turner, Ron Kay from RonKLA.com. Our pictures are furnished by Skype. Ron, you kick it off. Should the state and the city follow the federal government's lead and think about freezing the salaries?
It's nowhere near enough. The federal government can keep printing money and pile it up greater and greater debt. California and L.A. actually have to cut salaries, cut benefits, and cut a deal with workers that gives them their job security instead of being pushed into the position where we're going to have massive cuts, layoffs, cuts in services, and we are heading off a cliff into disaster. Freezing won't do the job. It will take way too long. And frankly, you know, if they could cut that deal, a discrete short-term tax from the public might actually balance the budgets of both the city and state. Anything else only creates a deeper and deeper hole, more debt going forward, more burdens on the future of the city and state. A freeze just isn't enough.
But see, Cameron, the deal is that union officials are never, ever going to go for anything like that. And if that's the case, how do you fix it?
Well, Ron just used the T word. And I think ultimately that's what the state and federal governments are going to have to face up to. There's no way to get out of these budget holes without looking at some revenue enhancement, whether you call it taxes or fees or something. You know, I'm thinking about all these banks that are doing so wonderfully since the federal bailout. And I'm wondering if perhaps we should apply some revenue enhancement over on that side. Maybe we could tax some of the transactions going through banks. I have to agree generally with Ron that looking at spending, salary freezes here in the state, I just don't see that as a solution. As a federal measure, I think it's very limited in its application. It's going to make people feel nice. It's a way for the president to appease his Republican critics. But as far as that federal deficit is concerned, nothing serious is going to happen until the military budget is cut. That is the reason we've got this horrible federal deficit. 10 years of war that have yielded us practically nothing. Not much of a help here in California, but on a federal level, it's not going to do much. That freeze is not going to really do much.
Well, obviously, the problems in the city and the state are going to continue now, beginning in January. You can mount a camera under the windshield of your car. The camera is pointed at you. The goal is to make people aware of bad habits by reporting their behavior seconds before and after a crash or erratic driving maneuver. For example, parents could install the cameras in their kids' cars. Of course, businesses could install those cameras as well in trucks and buses. Transportation companies with large fleets could install those cameras as well. The ACLU says this brings up privacy issues. Should the company have the right to record you while you're at work? Are the cameras a good idea, or do they invade people's privacy, Ron?
Well, you know, let's put some cameras in all the city officials and state officials and county officials who have publicly paid for cars, and let's broadcast it on channels that we can all see what they're up to. I mean, it's absolutely outrageous as an idea, this insecurity complex that America has, that somehow we can have cameras at every street corner, cameras at every gas station, full body scanners, that somehow we can vaccinate ourselves against danger, and nobody has to make judgments about who's doing their job, who's being safe, who's behaving and following the law. I just find this whole maniacal need to have cameras and recordings of everything. They're not flying a plane with 400 passengers. They're driving a car, and people make mistakes. And what are you going to do? Have breathalyzers in every car? I mean, let's just put handcuffs on ourselves and just stay home the rest of our lives.
Cameron, but do you believe that a business should have the right to monitor their employees?
I think the privacy issues are very serious, but even more than that, this to me just seems like unnecessary expense. There's no evidence that having dashboard cameras is going to have any impact at all on driver safety. So the suggestion by legislators that this is going to somehow be a safety measure, the most telling thing here is that this bill working its way through our state legislature was proposed by Nathan Fletcher. He's a Republican assemblyman down in San Diego. He proposed this because there's a company in his district called DriveCam, which makes these cameras. So this is not even about safety. This is about making sure that a business in his district does business. So it's a joke. It's unnecessary. It's not going to enhance safety. And I think the privacy issues are a real concern.
No, go ahead. Finish it up, Cameron. You got more? Or you're done.
No, that's the bottom. I just think it's just so laughable to me that a lawmaker is putting something through that's going to have a direct benefit for a company in his district, and he's trying to pass it off as a safety measure. Well, it's so transparent.
Yeah, you know what? That's very unusual in politics. You would never think anybody would try anything like that. Okay, if you are planning a trip to San Francisco and you're doing a lot of walking, don't sit on the street between the hours of 7 a.m. and 11 p.m. And if you were considering laying down on the street, if you were, don't do that either. That's against the law. One of the most liberal cities in America has banned sitting or sleeping on the streets during those hours. Basically, it's to keep the homeless from camping out. Critics call it cruel and heartless. The Board of Supervisors doesn't like it. But the voters approved it. Cameron, do you like it? Would it be a good idea in Southern California cities?
Well, I think really this kind of a reactionary law really just what it does is it underscores the fact that our society has not come up with any kind of solution to the problem of homelessness. A measure like this will be a Band-Aid at best. I mean, you can keep people off the streets during daylight hours and the first part of the nighttime, but it's not going to remove them from these communities. You know, one of the things, Fred, we need to look at is who our homeless population is. We kind of have this impression, and certainly backers of this bill, local merchants and others, talked about, winos and drug addicts on the street with scary dogs, as if that is, indicative of the overall homeless population. Do you know that we have got here in that city of San Francisco 200,000 homeless youth, young people, teenage minors? These are kids who've been driven out of their homes because of abuse, neglect, and so on, and they're on the street because they have no place to go. What we have got to do is come up with some kind of a solution. Shelters, something that's going to give us an answer to this problem. This law will have no effect except moving people around, and it won't solve a problem and make anyone's life really improve.
Ron, what do you think? You like this law?
Well, I think it's the old vagrancy laws that were ruled unconstitutional brought back. Nobody's ever found a simple solution to the homeless people on the street, whether they're bums, drugs, addicts, kids who have lost their way, or families or whatever. I think it's blatantly unconstitutional. It's just an excuse for cops to harass people. And those laws have been struck down 40 years ago. I wrote about it as a cub reporter that led to a Supreme Court ruling that vagrancy laws were too ill-defined. And so sitting on the street, what about a kid sitting on the curb at the corner?
That's not
watching
allowed.
The cars go by.
That's
Is he going to be hassled?
Yeah, you can't do that. You can't sit, Ron. You got to keep moving.
No sitting on the street.
No sitting on the street. Okay. I don't know about you. I love dogs. If you're a dog lover, how do you feel about this? They already do it in San Bernardino County. They're considering it in the city of Cypress. mandating spaying or neutering for specific dog breeds. In San Bernardino County, it's pit bulls. If you have one, you probably think they're lovable. If you don't, you may think they're vicious. This law is designed to keep the pit bull population low. If you don't do it, you could be fined and the dog could be taken from you. Mandatory spaying and neutering for dogs that are considered vicious. A good idea, Cameron?
Well, what's this going to do to ensure safety? You know, people who've got pit bulls and other breeds. First of all, you're saying you're only going to require it for certain breeds. So I don't get that. I mean, next month it'll be something other than the pit bull. I remember back when the Doberman was the one that everyone was afraid of. Pit bulls are some scary dogs, and a lot of people raise them to be aggressive. So you can mandate spaying and neutering, but how is that going to keep people safe? Somebody who wants to own a pit bull will go outside the city and buy one and bring it into the community. And if they raise that dog to be aggressive, you've still got a problem. So making it impossible for these dogs to reproduce is not even going to achieve the goal that is supposedly behind this legislation. And once again, we're back to something having to do with, fairness. Can you really single out one breed for this kind of action?
Not a bad point. Ron, what do you think?
Well, I think Cameron's exactly got it right. I got my wife adopted from the bushes running around our neighborhood, a big, ugly pit bull Shar-Pei mix who's totally docile unless somebody comes near her that he doesn't know, and then he could chop their head off with his jaw that's about 6 feet wide. He's spayed and neutered. It doesn't change his defensive behavior. It doesn't make the world safer. It's just another example of trying to solve a problem through legislative controls. I'm sure San Bernardino doesn't register and have control or licenses on a third to half the dogs, just like Los Angeles. So who are they punishing? They're punishing the law-abiding, the people who take care of their dogs. The truth is education's the answer. It's the answer to smoking, to obesity. We have to put out real education to people and constantly give them the message and train them to how to handle their dogs. It's not the dog's fault. It's the owner's fault. And if there should be punishments, it's owners who let their dogs hurt other people.
I'll tell you something. You would never have a problem like this if you were in my house, because I have the perfect breed. I have a Maltese. About this
There
thing.
you go.
There you go. All right, Ron and Cameron.
That's the same breed I've got.
There you
That's
go.
the little guy barking in the background.
All right, you guys have a great night. Thanks so much.
Take care. Thanks.